the shadow work can be difficult. It can be hard. It can be really taxing. And sometimes you don't always have people in your immediate circle who have done that work, or perhaps you're at a different vibration to your family, and that's causing some discordant frequencies. It's maybe not connecting at home. So you need those places to connect and talk to. And that's what golden frequency is providing.
Welcome to the Awaken Magazine podcast, where we feature inspiring leaders who are helping our world awaken to love. I'm your host, David Trotter, and today I want to share with you a wonderful conversation with Gem Auset. She's an Australian producer, artist, DJ, and event curator who utilizes specific sound frequencies to create transcendent music and healing experiences. Rolling Stone has dubbed her an artist you should know about, and others consider her to be the second best female producer in the world. Now, in this conversation with Gem, she shares all about her early spiritual awakening and how that helped usher her into this involvement with music and consciousness. We talk about the specific sound frequencies that she utilizes in her music and how that impacts us not only scientifically, but spiritually. And we talk about her involvement in the Grammy Next program and how that program helped create a community of collaborators that have really benefited her life and her music. If you have not already, I want to encourage you to subscribe to the Awaken Magazine podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or Amazon Music, plus YouTube. Yeah, click subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a friend. You know someone who would love to meet Gem and hear all about her artistry and music. All right, let's jump into my conversation with Gem Auset. Well, Gem, thanks so much for taking some time to connect with us today. It's great to see you.
Of course, it's wonderful to be here.
Yeah. So I want to hear about all of your story as a musician, a DJ, a producer, all the things. But I want to begin by just hearing a little bit about your story of awakening to consciousness, mindfulness, spirituality. Where did you grow up? Did you grow up with faith or spirituality a part of your home life? Tell us about it.
I did. I think I was quite lucky in that my parents were very open-minded. They were musicians and artists in their own right, and I think I had exposure to a lot of different things. I went to a Catholic school in a tiny country town in a small pocket of Australia that even Australians have never heard of, called Mandalong in the Wadigan Mountains, and it was a stunning place to grow up. Very small, very sheltered, more cows than people, but it instantly gave me this reverence and this connection to nature that I think I've carried through into my adulthood and into my music. And faith was always a part of that. A Catholic school, although my family were not rigid on religion, they really allowed us to find our own way and what felt right for us. And I was very, very young when I started meditating. I was very called to meditate, and I remember it was a point of contention with some of my friends because we would be 7 and 8 years old and they would be going to go to netball and I'd be going to meditate. And they found that quite strange. And when they
Like
would
during
come
the
over,
school day, like
in the
break.
afternoon after
Yeah.
school sports, they would do netball and I would I would go to meditation class because that's what I asked my parents, that I really wanted to learn to meditate. And they were like, "Where are you getting this from?" And I don't know. I don't know if that was a download or channeled, but I felt very called to do that very young. And
Wow.
I'm so glad I did, because it's been a saving grace time and time again. So the lessons started early, and it did die away a little bit during adolescence. I think you want to conform and you want to be part of the group. And so I pushed that side of me away and I held it down, but it can't be held down. And that is what awakening is. It just awakens in you. And I realized that there was this part of myself that I was shutting off and that I was quietening and not listening to. And the more you try and do that, paradoxically, the louder it gets, and it gets impossible to ignore. And that's definitely what happened to me. So I had two awakenings in a way. One when I was a child that was very natural and very comfortable. and then one in my later adolescence that it just got so loud that I couldn't ignore it anymore. So I was like, okay, we're doing this thing again, and plugged myself back into the system. And that actually felt like coming home. And I was so glad that the energy and the universe had reawakened that in me, because I definitely wouldn't be the same person without it. And in hindsight, you look back at all these threads that connect you to everything else. And I think, oh my gosh, I'm so grateful for that. Although it wasn't always rainbows and butterflies, you definitely go through that very difficult, very difficult phase. And I did have times where it did feel a bit isolating, and my fear of it being different to the normal or different to what my friends were doing. I think that's just something you need to go through to find your own voice and your own message, and be comfortable in the discomfort, which is a wild concept. But once you start making peace with that, I think it gets a bit smoother.
What was it about meditation for you as you kind of re-entered that at adolescence?
Mm.
Because oftentimes people think about meditation as stress relief, you know, but there are so many other aspects of meditation as well that introduce us to different things. What was it about meditation at that age that
Mm.
drew you in, and what were you experiencing?
I think it was the only time where I could hear the voice in a way that wasn't confronting. So I used to have these experiences where I'd be going to cross a road and I'd hear someone yell, Gem! And I'd stop and I'd turn around and there was nobody there. But a car would fly past, and that had prevented me from getting hit by a car. I had quite a few of these events where something yelled at me, it sounded like, but it prevented something bad from happening. And when I would go into the meditation state, that voice was one that I could connect with more easily and speak to in a way that wasn't frightening. And I felt that I could really sink down and drop down into a space that I would refer to as the void. But it was a beautiful void. It was one that was definitely filled with my imagination, and filled with light, and it was a really safe space. And I found that in meditation, to go in my own environment, at a time that was good for me, it felt like a safe way to approach that voice rather than walking across a busy road. Or so it was really about connecting.
At that age, how would you describe that voice? Would you put a name to that voice or a description, or how would
It
you
felt familiar. It
okay.
felt familiar. It felt not somebody that I had met, but felt like they were on my side. It was definitely familiar and warm, although I knew that it wasn't the voice of my parents or a family member. So familiar, although we hadn't met. And that was always really hard to describe to people. But I just learned to trust it over time. And I think those initial early adolescent years of pushing that away, when I embraced it, I made peace with this voice that was more like a friend or a higher self or a universe that was allowing me to, I think, connect in. And a really interesting thing happened, because I would have these ideas or these pieces that I would pull down from the collective. And if I didn't do anything with them, I would see them played out in other ways. And so I had this real understanding that that voice, or this web of interconnectedness, it's there for everyone. And those ideas aren't, they're certainly not mine. They're part of a larger collective that anyone can reach up and pull down. And I think that was very exciting to me, that it was not isolating. Actually, it was part of a bigger web that it was connecting me into, of like-minded consciousness. And that was very exciting.
Amazing. Talk to me about your upbringing when it comes to music. Were you part of a household where music was prominent, or was that something you explored on your own?
Yeah, it was definitely prominent. I joke and say it was a sickness and we were all inflicted, but it's a beautiful thing. It's our language to each other. And although I live 9,000 miles away from my family, I still use music as a mechanism to connect with them. And that was certainly the case at home. I would come home and dad would be playing guitar, and my uncles and my stepmom and my brothers, and it is really everyone is into music in different forms. And my great grandfather would sing and had a radio show. It's definitely part of our archetypal journey, I think, to create and to create together.
And so what were you drawn to in those early years? Was it singing or instrumentation, or how did that kind of unfold for you?
I loved writing. I loved sitting down and doing my meditation or just sitting under a tree. I mean, it's no surprise to any of my family with the music that I've ended up making, where I'm recording nature sounds. But I would really love to write. So I would sit down and take inspiration from nature and then create these pieces and have my family play them. Or it would start off as a poem or a little piece of lyric. And hearing other people perform that, later on I learned that that's what a writer and a producer does, but it was very natural, and just I just wanted to create something for them to share in was really the motivation originally. And that
And
then grew into playing the bass and singing sometimes when there's no one better. But mostly I just love creating.
okay, so give me an example of something that as a young kid you wrote, and then how did that play out? Did you actually begin to go into the recording studio as a young person?
Yeah, I think my first recording was at 3, although that wasn't original. That was Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. So I don't think I was breaking any writing barriers with that one. I would write. I think originally my writing would scare my parents a little, and it was an outlet. And they were like, "Well, we're glad that you're getting this out. This is a bit much for the world right now." And so it was a safe container in which I could channel, although I wouldn't have called it that at the time. And I think one of the earliest pieces that I wrote that was recorded that they were okay with me sharing with people was called Afterglow. And it was a piece just about sitting in that warmth and that golden glow. And it's funny when I reflect on that now, because I have my event series, the Golden Frequency, and everything I do, I'm really trying to bring that warm feeling that I found when I was little and then lost along the way and refound. And I think I'll probably spend my whole life writing about that feeling, that aliveness, that connectedness. Because when you connect into that, there's just nothing like it. There's just no comparison. It's like that true presence of love and aliveness. And I just think that's why we're here. And if I can share that a little bit with people, that makes me very happy. But it's not lost on me. That was also one of my earliest recorded pieces. I was around 12 when we recorded Afterglow.
Mhm. When you
Mm.
talk about an afterglow, you talked
Mm.
about the feeling of, I don't want to put words in your, I'm trying to remember exactly what you said, but a sense of life, a sense of love. Um, what where do you most prominently or most often experience that feeling?
Oh, I experience it a lot in the studio all the time. We're always trying to connect into that. But meditation, first thing in the morning, under a red light, just trying to connect into my true self before I have looked at the internet or before I've looked at my phone. It's really that place that we have available to us all of the time, but it's easy to disconnect from it, and it's easy to be distracted, and it's easy to let the world dictate. But I think it's the place that we all have naturally. And I try and do it first thing in the morning and then recreate it in the studio. But also, it's doing yoga with friends and it's dancing under the stars. And I love a static dance. And it's just anything where you get that real connection and that pure energy of joy. And I always feel that I come home from events or meditating or studio, and I do have this little, like, my frequency has increased, my aura is brighter, and there's a sense of an afterglow where you think, oh, I want to bathe in this forever. How do I hold on to this moment?
Yeah, I just interviewed a woman who's an incredible psychic and leader named
Mm,
Suzanne Ross, and she talked about transcendence as a way of living. So
mm,
how do we not only experience, and I'm using this word of transcendence as, kind of this afterglow, it's
mm.
transcending. I ask her, what does transcendence mean? And, it's transcending anything and everything that
Yeah.
somehow is bogging us down, that's not fully
Mhm.
aligned with that feeling of life and love that you're describing. And it's like,
Yeah.
that was her goal, was to live in a state of transcendence as just a way of living all the time, which is kind
Mm.
of what you're describing.
Yeah, it's really beautiful. And I think it's in a similar vein to how I use intention and frequency. And really, what I'm striving to do is just bring beautiful frequencies that people can align an intention to. And I truly believe that's where healing, or that's when transcendence occurs. And it's the marriage of those two really beautiful elements. But I can create music and I can have frequency, and that's a great and wonderful place to start. And then I think you embed your intention in. And I think that is where true transcendence and healing occurs. And that's really magic.
Hmm. Well, you are no longer 12, but you are still a producer, a DJ, an artist, an event producer.
Yeah.
Talk to me about all of these different roles that you are playing. What is your main focus in life at this moment?
My main focus is to bring more conscientious music to the world, and that takes shape a different in different formats, as you said. So there's the producing in the studio, and then bringing it to live shows and events. I see the role as the same, whether I'm in the studio or whether I'm on a stage or at an event. It's I'm just a messenger. I'm just a person that's bringing this through, and I think that it it's there for people when they're ready to connect with it, and we all come to it at different phases and stages, and that's more than okay. But I see that as just bringing this beautiful thread of golden frequency through, and when people align their own intention to it, whether I think it changes daily for each of us. But that's really my role. I'm here as a messenger, and my modality is music.
Yeah. So I've been listening to your album Sacred Spaces, which is under the name The Alchemy of Frequency on Spotify.
Yes.
And we'll link to that, of course, in the show notes. I'm actually using two tracks in my breathwork session that I lead. I lead a breathwork session at our studio here in Southern California every Wednesday night. So I'm using Heartfelt
Yes.
and Debris for the first time. I was listening to it today. I was like, oh, I'm gonna use these tonight. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah, thank you. And Heartfelt is it's a guided meditation with nature sounds and all in 432 hertz, which I love producing in. And Debris is actually off my album Healing Feelings under Gem on Spotify. And it also is in 432. And I love the affirmations, and it's quite catchy. I use that in the morning. I'm like, oh, yeah, I feel good. And it just gets you in a vibe.
Yeah, yeah.
Using it.
Talk to me about the use of frequencies, 432 hertz. I know in this whole world of spirituality, we talk about raising your frequency, and then
Mhm.
there's frequency music. For people who don't know, what is actually frequency? Like, what is that? And why is using 432 frequencies
Mm.
important? How do you
Yeah.
even use, I mean, this is a technical question, but how do you even use 432 frequencies?
No,
What is it?
I
And
love
how do
these
you
questions.
use it?
Yeah. So what is it? So everything oscillates at a certain frequency. It's just time and pitch of a sound wave, and everything is impacted by that. So there's some beautiful studies on water, which is really what I based the frequencies that I use around by Dr. Emoto. And it's just that water has consciousness, and when you think of our bodies and what percentage of water we are, that we too are so impacted by frequencies. And he did a study playing different frequencies, different songs, some with really positive messages of love and hope, and then some darker messages. And the water would disfigure under a microscope, or it would become very symmetrical and very lovely, like we see in nature, like leaves and snowflakes. And when you think of your body, you want to be in alignment, you want to be in harmony, you want to be symmetrical. And so we're using these frequencies that have been proven under a microscope to have an impact on the water within your body. And I find that just so wild and incredible. And 432 and 528 hertz are both two of the most wonderful frequencies to use for this purpose. They're frequencies that are actually found, this is so crazy, but if you take a piece of the most beautiful nature and you strip it back to its core, that is actually the frequency in which nature resonates at. And my whole work is just really trying to get us back to our most natural homeostasis. It's bringing us back to nature because it's divine and so beautiful, untouched as is. And so these frequencies that we tune in the studio, we have whole notes and we have songs that are tuned to these frequencies, and it's just bringing you back into alignment, bringing that consciousness and that intention into the water in your body to have you symmetrical and balanced and in alignment. How you use it, it's really up to you. I personally love putting on a song and placing my intention. So that's back to the formula that we were just saying, frequency plus intention equals healing. And that's something I've found very, very true. It's something that I see playing out at these workshops and experiences. And I have beautiful messages of people contacting me saying, "Oh, we listened to 432 hertz on one of your playlists." And as we were meditating, and they have these really transcendental experiences, which I love getting that feedback. But I think playing it as part of your routine and learning to set an intention and really directing it. I think we're incredibly powerful beings, and a little bit of intention goes such a long way with instructing, well, how would I like to use this frequency? Let's use debris as an example. It has these powerful morning affirmations. Okay, so I'm waking up and I want to feel good and I want to feel free. And I let go of anything that isn't serving me, which is all intentions in the song. You can really embody that in your morning practice as you're playing this frequency. And it's just like supercharging your morning affirmations. I love a good old biohack. So that's how I would suggest using it.
Talk to us about this album, Sacred Spaces. What inspired you to make it? You've talked about that a little bit because everything is at 432 frequencies, but that specific album, when
Mm,
people listen to it, of course, we'll link to it on Spotify, but when
thank you.
people listen to it, what can they expect?
Yeah, so that album was really inspired by, as I'm traveling around presenting music at these gorgeous spaces, there are some places, and I'm sure you've experienced this, David, you walk in, you go, wow, the energy just as it stands is incredible. I mean, California is so rich in some of these spaces. I definitely feel that when I go to Joshua Tree. I'm like, whoa, the vortex is just undeniable. There's this hum that is, it's so striking and moving. And I wanted to capture that. So I would go around to these sacred spaces, these beautiful places in nature, and I would record the ambient sounds. So places like the Daintree rainforest in Australia. That was actually a very funny recording because when I wasn't expecting the frog sounds to be so intense. It was actually a little bit scary. I was like, wow, it was just so big. But places like that and taking the ambient frequency and then we composed around it using a beautiful orchestra and some friends of mine, all in 432 hertz. But the nature, the ambient sound of the location of the title of the track was really the bed of the frequency. And then we just did our best to complement what nature was already providing. So it's a nice little travel through time to all different spaces and places around the world.
Yeah, so I was just in Sedona. Mandy and I, my partner and I were in Sedona last weekend for a conference. And, it was for the first time I had been there snowing. I mean, snow is just pouring down and all of the rock formations are just covered in snow
I've never
and
seen it snowing. That
yeah,
would be incredible.
snow on the side of the road and the cars covered in snow. And so anyway, I was listening to your track, the Sedona Sunrise today, and the beautiful nature sounds. How would you describe that particular track?
That song for me was like nature wakes you up and reveals itself to you. And I think when we have these phases in life, we're in a really good routine and we're not being woken up by an alarm because your body clock is really working. I feel like the alignment with nature is very similar. And when I was out there watching sunrise, the nature creeps up on you and it's this slow rising, and it was very, very powerful. And I had this feeling of being very humbled. I felt very, very small against the backdrop of such beauty. And I think
Mhm.
there's that removal of ego that's really important throughout this work. And being somewhere like Sedona definitely does that. And that track was really around that bringing nature up so you're quiet amongst it all.
Mhm.
Mm.
You have another song that I believe you've released more recently called "Not of the World," and it features the voice of Ram Dass, and he is quoting actually a scripture from the Bible the being not in the world, or not, yeah, not being in the world. I'm so sorry. Being in the world, but not of the world. There we go. I got it right. I actually was a Christian pastor for over a decade,
Oh,
and
incredible.
transitioned out of that kind of life of ministry about 17 years ago. So it's a very interesting passage. And
Mm,
to hear Ram Dass talking about that in the middle of your song, talk to me about who is
yeah.
Ram Dass to you? Why did you make that song?
Ram Dass. Wow. Yeah. Who is Ram Dass to me? An incredible spiritual teacher and a mentor of sorts. I think we all have mentors, some that never know they're mentors to us. So maybe he does. I find that when I listen to his I have to listen to his talks multiple times because they're just so
Totally.
rich and dense with information. I'm like, "Wait, what?" And then I
What did you just say?
pause. Yeah, and it's mind-blowing to me, and it's so layered that I have to go back and listen so many times, and I take all this new information from it, and I think, speaking of messengers, what a powerful, powerful messenger he was. And my biggest challenge when I was working with the Love Serve Foundation, who um, beautifully represents all of his IP and his work. I Picking one message of Ram Dass is like picking a favorite child. I'm like, how do I do this? And I listen to hours and hours. And so I hope that there's a long album with lots of Ram Dass work coming because I have so many saved. And that message, I think, for me resonated at the time because I live in a few different places and I'm traveling the world, and there is often this propensity in life to get caught up in the weeds, to be somewhere and be. We were speaking earlier about having setting your energy rather than having it dictated to, and I think Ram Dass is such a powerful and brilliant example of someone that was able to do this, and that whole point to engage but not let it dictate you, to be there and be present but also be able to be the observer at all times. That's a really difficult task. That's something that's incredibly hard to do. And you find yourself drawn into debate, drawn into the conflict, drawn into the negativity or the darkness that's available if you choose that. Or can you notice that and observe it and be aware of it and still maintain your energy, still maintain your presence and have a little barrier, and that's been a real lesson for me, I think, as an empath. I think just take everything on and I'll be in the studios at events and it's easy to be depleted. And I think this message of being really involved and present but still maintaining your highest self and your frequency, that's, as a frequency lover, that's something that just really resonated with me. And I'm so glad you know that passage. I cut and pasted around to compose it to be listenable in a musical format. But I would really recommend that people go back and listen to his speeches around this because they are incredible and deep. And I yeah I don't even know where to start or end with Ram Dass. He will just be a forever teacher.
Beautiful. There's
Mm,
a writer who his name is Edwin Friedman. He writes about family systems theory, and he talks about our role in the midst of relationships being that of a non-anxious presence. So that if we can be a non-anxious presence in the midst of any relationship, that it
mm,
doesn't cause us to, create this anxiety based on what's happening around us, but yet
yeah,
still be present. So it's like being in the moment, but
mhm,
not allowing the moment to somehow
mm.
change our own frequency, our own dynamic. Yeah.
Exactly. Being in the world, not of the world. And I think, as usual, he's got this such an articulate and beautiful way of saying it. You're like, of course. But yeah, I love Ram Dass. As I said, I look forward to doing many, many of his songs.
Yeah. I know you have been a part of a program called Grammy Next, and
Yes.
I've heard you talk about that in other places. What is Grammy Next? What has that experience been like for you? What is the kind of the outcome that's desired from it?
Yeah, thank you. Grammy Next, it was a beautiful opportunity. I'm so grateful for. I it was actually the catalyst to move to LA, and I've really found a gorgeous group of community through it. So I'm very, very grateful. And I was one of 8 people from around the world selected for that particular year, and one of 2 women. I think I'm absolutely loving seeing more females in the technical side of music, and I'm a huge champion of that. And Grammy Next is a program by the Recording Academy, which is the company that give out Grammys, and they are trying to build music community for a better tomorrow. And that's something that I really aligned with. And I have met many ambient and new age leaders through this, where the music is just so powerful. Actually, speaking of Ram Dass, one of the incredible Grammy nominated records by Beretta. He Dreams, and he's Alan Watts' work, and it actually really inspired my own work with Ram Dass. So I think there's been a lot of inspiration and a lot of people that I've met through that. And currently, I am about to release an album that's all based around the moon, and we have a single coming out this month actually called Mountain Meditation. And this is with a Grammy nominee. Her name is Cheryl, and she's an incredible composer and a brilliant collaborator. It's actually taught me a lot about the art of collaborating, because we're polar opposites. We are the yin and yang of each other in every situation. And it's taught me a lot about how to adapt to that when you're so different and you're coming at it from just a completely different point of view. And all of her strengths are my weaknesses, and vice versa. And it's quite beautiful that way, because I feel like we've come out of it realizing that differences should be celebrated. And when you can find a way to work together as beautifully as we have, you don't fear differences. You're actually like, oh, wow, you're so different like this. How do we make this work? And I think that's a real message at the moment of embracing people that are different, or different belief system to you, different values. And that has just been a magical work to bring to life, a labor of love for sure, that we've been doing over the last year. But that is the next step for me as part of this, meeting Cheryl through the Grammy community, and we are releasing it. We have an album launch in Mammoth Lakes in June in California, and it's so delightful to I can't believe that I get to make ambient music that's around nature. I'm still like, wait, I get to do this. This is so cool. I'm incredibly grateful. So the program brought me to LA and put me with mentors, and it's just been an incredible journey.
Mm-hmm. How do you navigate the
Mm.
projects that come your way, from you being your own artist to
Yeah.
producing for yourself? I don't know if you produce for others as well, versus being a DJ versus events. How do you navigate all of those different options?
Yeah, it's all the same, really. Sometimes my voice is louder and sometimes it's softer. And when I produce for other people, they definitely come to me because they want a gem like thing. So there's some synergy there that I can bring. I'm currently working on a movie score that is all about frequency and bringing those beautiful ambient and electronic frequencies to film. And so whilst it's not, I didn't write the script and it's something that I've been brought into, they've been attracted to using me in that way because of the frequency music that I make. And so I think
Mhm.
that's true for artists that I work with. That's true for remixers. You're coming to me because you want an ambient, textured, nature-like sound. And I think that's just become my brand and I think what I love the most. So I'm also choosing projects that align with that. I want to work on music that forwards a message of intention and consciousness and helps people really connect in with that. And so it's in the selection process, but I just feel like I'm the same in all in all of these. It's just taking these frequencies and bringing them to life for others and for myself.
I don't know the statistics, but you mentioned just a few seconds ago
Mm.
the like perhaps a lack of women in more of the producing side of music, the technical side. Why is that? And do you see that things are changing? Give me kind of a behind the scenes picture.
It's definitely changing, and I love that so much. I think there's a real core. You just want representation of all kinds, especially in something like art. Art is something that people look to, and art can be dismissed as frivolous until you need it. And then when you need it, it's survival. It's that album that got you through a dark period, or got you through recovery, or got you through a breakup. And it's the albums that helped you ascend to higher levels of yourself, or ask bigger questions, or paintings that you stand in front of and you're never the same after. And so I think art is so important in that way for our own evolution. And for that, it needs all voices of all different backgrounds to contribute, so that we do have voices that speak to you. And I think it's changing in a beautiful way. I'm seeing female producers. I'm hearing music that I never would have been exposed to if those people weren't given a chance to share their voice. And that's a beautiful, wonderful thing. I think technology has helped so much. Publications like yours, where you're giving voice to people that think differently and share consciousness, and it's wasn't represented as thoroughly before in mainstream media. And there's just this hunger for it now in society. And I love that. So yes, I see it changing. I think statistically it was 1% were previously female producers, which is quite low. And I'm not currently sure what the percentage today, but I do see it increasing. And for DJs and engineers, I believe it was 3%. So yeah, underrepresented across the board in technical roles. Why was that? I'm not sure. Were opportunities. I think we're all pretty accustomed to what a boys' club looks like, and
Mm-hmm.
also just music can be unappealing for women. In if you are walking into studios that are all men, there wasn't HR. Is it safe? You're traveling. It's nighttime shows. Safety, I think, is
Mm-hmm.
a major implication in that. And so creating environments like we are doing with our events that are during the day at sunset, and it's safe and it's inclusive, and having spaces and places where people can feel safe, feel welcomed, come as you are. I think that's incredibly important.
Mm-hmm. Talk to me about these events that you've referred to, Golden Frequency series. What are they? Where do they happen?
Currently, they happen in Malibu and in Mammoth Lakes, and we are looking to expand those to everywhere that we're touring. It is just a beautiful offering, and it's just such a piece of my heart, because it's festivals that I tour at that all my favorite parts of them. Like, I love going to an event where you start consciously and we set the energy, and there's movement. Sometimes it's yoga, sometimes it's dance, but it's setting that intention and then really grounding that into your body. And I think that is just so powerful. Then we have a beautiful music component that composed of DJing and live instrumentation, really cool instruments and vocal toning. And it's just this really uplifting, beautiful thing. And the community that's being built from that is probably my favorite, my favorite thing about it. Just having a space to go that people think like you, and oh, we're all here to get better, and you can trade meditation practices, or what are you trying, and what ritual oils are you using, and what have you been through recently, and just a place to be held, a space to really be held by peers that, oh, I've had, we know it's not always beautiful. It can be really, the shadow work can be difficult. It can be hard. It can be
Mm-hmm.
really taxing. And sometimes you don't always have people in your immediate circle who have done that work, or perhaps you're at a different vibration to your family, and that's causing some discordant frequencies. It's maybe not connecting at home. So you need those places to connect and talk to. And that's what golden frequency is providing.
Mm-hmm. Talk for a moment to people who are listening today who would consider themselves an artist, whether it's musical art or visual art or performance art, and they're trying to figure out, how do I make a living at this? How do I actually do this for the majority of my time in life. What is your
Yeah.
advice or encouragement that you'd give to them?
Yeah. My biggest advice is find your authentic message. And that's counterintuitive. And I think there's so much information online, and you're meant to fit into a box, you're meant to fit into an algorithm. But in the same way, how I was talking about, we need different voices, we need different perspectives, we need all the colors of the rainbow so that people can find their likeness within you. And if you're hiding that, if you're squandering it, if you're trying to be something you're not, then that means there are a bunch of people out there that can't connect with you, that are just like you, that need your message. And I think more than ever, we need that really unique point of view, that message. So I would say find what that is, and then it gets a little bit hairy. It gets a little bit tricky when you're first sharing your art. There are going to be naysayers. I know making ambient electronic music, people are like, why does it need to be in this frequency? And I got a lot of pushback. And that's okay, because that's part of the educational process. And this is what I'm called to do. And it's true to my artistic process. If that doesn't fit you, that's okay. And I think having that confidence to stay the path, because it does get shaken, but find your authentic voice and then just do whatever you can to bring it to the world. And with technology, it's so easy. You can get on Instagram, you can get on YouTube, TikTok, whatever your platform is. Just, we need you. Come to the party. Bring your voice.
Beautiful. If people want to hear your voice and connect with you and follow your music, what's the best place for them to reach out and connect?
Yeah, I love receiving DMs on Instagram. I'm Gem Auset on Instagram. On Spotify, I am also Gem, and on all the music platforms, you can find me everywhere. But I love receiving personal messages from people who have listened to the music or who want advice on how to better use frequency. It's one of my favorite things to talk about. So please feel free to reach out to me, and I will always respond.
And your website is gemauset.com. We'll
It
link
is.
to your website, Instagram, all the platforms in the
Thank
show
you.
notes as well. So, Gem, thank you for what you're doing in the world. It's just
Oh,
wonderful to get to meet you and hear your story and just feel your heart is so pure and just desire to bring good to the world through music and through experiences. So, thank you for all that you're doing.
oh, thank you, David. I love what you're doing and your publication, and a home to house all of us. It's really beautiful, and I'm truly honored to be here. So thank you for your time.
Thanks for listening to the Awaken Magazine podcast. If you enjoyed this episode and our other conversations, would you mind taking a moment to leave a 5-star review and maybe even a comment on Spotify or Apple Podcasts? That's one of the ways that you can give back to the show and help us reach more people. And of course, feel free to share the episode with a friend. And if you're not already on our email list, we send out an inspiring email every Monday morning full of articles and interviews. Just head on over to awakenedmagazine.com and click subscribe and join for free. Our hope is that all the resources we share will help our world continue awakening to love.